Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. All right, so today we're really diving deep, going all in. It's Bob Camblin, Houston artist, worked for decades, and just so many different styles, you wouldn't believe it. You sent us like a ton of stuff, quotes from him, like straight from the source. Then there are parts of books talking about his art. You even gave us a whole biography of him. And there's this YouTube video, like analyzing his lithograph. You know the one, Sea King the Longhorn? Yeah, it's a lot to process. But that's the whole point of this deep dive, right? We're going to figure out what his main ideas were, what kept popping up, and just try to get him, as an artist.
Yeah, I mean, you weren't kidding about all the material. It's impressive, really. You've
Yeah.
got his direct thoughts, then how people saw his work, like
Mm.
the reactions to it, and Zen and the Art of Enlightenment and Incomplete Works, plus his whole life story, basically, and then that deep dive into Sea King the Longhorn.
Hmm.
It's like looking at him from all these different angles.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to track how his style changed over time, see how Zen and existentialism, like those philosophies, got into his art. And we'll look at how he worked with other artists, too. He wasn't always a lone wolf. And then there are the themes that just keep coming back, like paradox, or how nothing stays the same, everything changes. And the way he makes you, the viewer, part of the whole thing. You're not just looking at his art, you're like in it. So yeah, lots to cover. But hey, remember that quote? The one about the atom and magic? Like how you find what you need in both?
Look into the atom, you get what you need. Look into magic, and you get what you need. Philosophy and art are in both. It's pretty much Campbell in a nutshell, right? He's not afraid to mix science and, like, the mystical stuff. They're both valid to him.
Totally. So Camblin, he starts in Oklahoma, right? Born in 1928. Both his parents, they were artists, so art's in his blood from the start. Goes to the Kansas City Art Institute. But then things get really interesting in 1955. Fulbright scholarship takes him to Italy. Seems like a turning point for him.
Yeah, the bio really makes a big deal out of his time in Italy. Like, he saw it all, the masters, Impressionism, the Uffizi Gallery, you name it. But what really stuck with him were those mummy images.
Yeah.
The Capuchin catacombs in Palermo. You know, these bodies preserved but, like, decaying. And later on, you see that in his art. Puppets, scarecrows, all in these reliquaries. All
Yeah.
these things in between, alive and dead, permanent and temporary.
Interesting. All right, so he comes back to the US, starts teaching. You'd think, okay, he's settling down, right? But even then, he's all about collaboration and like really shaking up the art world.
Oh, yeah. The teaching thing, that was at, like, a bunch of places. Ringling, University of Illinois, Detroit, Utah, and Rice. Big names. But then, in Houston, he's got this whole other thing going, B&E Productions,
Oh.
with Earl Staley and Joe Tate and their tattoo show.
Oh.
Talk about pushing the limits. Like, what even is art at that point? They wanted to make people think.
For sure. And it wasn't just about the final product, the artwork itself. They were all about the process. Sometimes they'd even sign stuff as anonymous or anonymous artists. Like, it wasn't about them.
Yeah, exactly. Putting the focus on the creation, not the ego. It really makes you wonder about, like, who the artist even is and, who owns the art. Camblin was playing with those ideas his whole career.
All right, so let's talk about his style because, this guy was all over the place. Started with abstract impressionism. For anyone listening who's not an art buff, think of it as like capturing the feeling of something, the energy, rather than painting it exactly how it looks. Like the brushstrokes and colors are the stars, not like perfect details. And from there, he just takes off in all sorts of directions.
Right. He never stood still. The early 50s, there's this social protest vibe,
Mhm.
bold lines, flat colors, very striking. But then, even by the mid-50s, he's mixing that social realism, showing everyday life and problems with non-objective stuff, like art that doesn't even try to be a picture of something real.
And then in the 60s, it's this crazy mix of Hugo van der Goes, who was all poetic and suggestive, with Goya, who was like intense emotion. It's a wild combo.
Totally. It's like he wanted his work to tell a story, but also hit you right in the gut emotionally.
Mhm.
But hold on, because the 70s are where things get really wild. He gets deep into metamorphosis and these life cycles, birth, death, rebirth, heavy stuff.
Yeah, the bio talks a lot about that period. He's referencing Freud, Di Chirico, Grunewald, and the imagery gets pretty intense. Puppets, scarecrows, water that's all murky, all inside these reliquaries. And he even wants you, the viewer, to be your own Gestalt psychologist. Like, figure it out yourself.
Yeah, there's a real shift towards symbolism and psychology. Those puppets and scarecrows, they could be about control, vulnerability, even transformation. The water and reliquaries, they're like mystery and time passing. Maybe even link back to those catacombs in Palermo.
And then the 80s, another change. Drawings and watercolors, but they're like tricking your eye. illusionistic surfaces. There are hidden images. You have to look close to find them. It's like he's always messing with how we see things.
Yeah, exactly. That layering, the hidden stuff, it goes right back to those themes we talked about, paradox, ambiguity.
Yeah.
He didn't want it to be easy. Like, he says, if you knew too much, you weren't playing the game. He wanted you to work for it, you know? The searching was important to him.
Right. And then there's this whole idea of nothing lasting forever, like that quote, fortunately, some things remain forever, or another 10 years, perhaps. It's almost like, I don't know, Zen or the I Ching or something.
Right. Both those traditions are all about how everything's in flux, always changing,
Yeah.
especially the I Ching, with its emphasis on constant transformation. Camblin's focus on birth, death, rebirth, it fits right in with that worldview.
And we touched on this before, but the viewer, you're not just a passive observer, you're part of the art. In Zen and the Art of Enlightenment, reviewers talk about how his pieces are like koans, those Zen riddles that are supposed to make you think differently, like break out of the usual way of seeing things. It's all about finding enlightenment in the everyday, seeing the absurdity, and realizing that everything's temporary.
And I think what's brilliant is that he's giving the power to the viewer. The art isn't telling you what to think, it's making you come up with your own meaning.
Yeah.
You're not just sitting there, you're thinking, reflecting. It's very much like that Zen idea of just seeing
Yeah.
direct experience.
And the guy was a reader for sure. Emerson, the I Ching, haiku, it all fed into his art. Like they're having a conversation.
Oh yeah, his mind was always working. And you see that in how he uses words in his art, like those fragments in Seeking the Longhorn. He's literally putting philosophical questions right there on the canvas.
And then there's this mystic switch thing. He talked about how your reaction to art, like your gut feeling, it changes over time. Like maybe a painting you hated when you were younger, now it makes you feel calm. And that change, that's the mystic switch flipping. It's like your truth in art, it's not fixed.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
It's saying that there's no right or wrong way to experience art. It's personal, and it grows with you.
And we can't forget his views on the art world. He wasn't always a fan. Thought galleries and museums, they often miss the point. And the whole commercial side of it, like money, 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 he thought that could really hurt art. There were even times he wouldn't take payment for his work. That's a statement right there.
Totally. It shows you how much he cared about the art itself, not just the money. It was about something deeper for him, a search for meaning, maybe even something spiritual, not just a product to sell.
Okay, so let's dive into Seeking the Longhorn. This YouTube analysis, it's really eye-opening. It's this surreal landscape, right? With the horns curved like that, and there's an enso in the middle, this circle. And then rocky ground, a blue ribbon of water winding through it. But then he throws in these words, like scattered around. You get what you deserve. Patience is a virtue. Stuff like that.
It's fascinating how the analysis breaks it all down. Even the
Yeah.
title, Seeking the Longhorn, it's a pun, like seeking the Longhorn. So right away, you're thinking about a quest, a journey. And then the landscape, it's a maze. And those phrases, they're like signs along the way. This isn't just a pretty picture, it's about something bigger.
And the YouTube video connects it all back to Zen, the I Ching, even Taoism.
Totally. That enso, the circle in Zen, that's impermanence, connection, even enlightenment, and all the chaotic stuff around it. That's like the distractions of life. And then patience, that's huge in Zen.
And they talk about the I Ching too, specifically hexagram 56, the wanderer, which makes sense, right? This whole idea of being on a journey, not knowing where you're going, and needing to be humble, able to adapt. That's what the wanderer has to do.
Exactly. All those paths in the lithograph, the messages that seem random, it's like being lost, trying to find your way. And there's that Taoist idea of wu wei, going with the flow, taking the path of least resistance. But then there's the reality of making choices and facing what happens because of them.
So Seeking the Longhorn, it's about a lot of things. Our choices, what happens because of them, karma, staying mindful when things are uncertain. It's about life. And the YouTube analysis says it's also about creativity, how unpredictable it can be. Like the process of making art is a journey too.
And don't forget, you, the viewer, you're part of it. You're not just looking at it, you're figuring it out, making your own story for the pieces he gives you. The analysis even calls you a co-creator.
So then, 1976, huge change. He quits teaching, just walks away from it all, decides to be a nomad, travels all over the place, soaking it all up.
He was following his own path, that's for sure. The bio talks about all the places he went, Italy again, France, Ireland, Mexico, even the South Pacific. It's like he needed to experience everything.
And his art. It's super sought after now, but it's hard to find. Which makes him even more mysterious. His friends, they describe him as this amazing storyteller, completely dedicated to art. And his studio, apparently it was like a wizard's workshop, full of weird and wonderful things. Oh, and did I mention the Mr. Peanut thing?
Yeah, that's a good one. He actually dressed up like Mr. Peanut and
Huh?
then started signing his work anonymous. It's like he was going back to that idea of getting rid of ego. Or maybe he was just making fun of the whole art world. Who knows?
And then he moves to Oregon, later Louisiana, with his wife Nancy. He basically disappears from the Houston art scene, like he just wanted to be left alone to create.
Yeah, it does seem like a conscious choice to step back. Maybe he needed new inspiration. Or just a simpler life. But the bio makes it clear his art still has an impact. It makes people think, challenges them.
So as we wrap this up, what stands out to you about Camblin? What's the takeaway?
I think it's the journey. He went through so many different phases, stylistically, and he was always grappling with these big ideas, philosophical stuff. He loved collaboration, at least for a while. But the main thing is, he wanted the viewer to be a part of the experience. His art is full of puzzles and layers, and he's inviting you to figure it out alongside him.
And for you listening, I hope you found this deep dive engaging and informative, especially if you're the kind of person who loves learning new things, having those aha moments, but without getting bogged down in too much detail. Camblin was all about packing big ideas into simple images and words. It's art that keeps you thinking.
Exactly. Remember that quote about the atom and magic? Camblin's art is like that. It's both at the same time. It's always making you look deeper. And those musha volantes, the dots and dashes making those optical illusions, that's Camblin in a nutshell. Challenging how you see things, making you pay attention.
This is just the tip of the iceberg, really. There's so much more to discover with Camblin. Go check out his work. See King the Longhorn is a great place to start. Think about the themes we discussed. Paradox, impermanence, the journey of self-discovery. See what speaks to you.
And to leave you with something to think about, Camblin said this: "The gate stays open, the fence is broken, he keeps searching, but does not know the size of his quarry, yet he has faith. He looks in all directions. If he could only see all around, all at once." Think about that in your own life. What are you searching for? And are you looking in all the right places? Maybe, just like with Camblin's art, the answers aren't simple. They're in the process of seeing and questioning, always looking at things from different angles.
That's Bob Camblin for you. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.
Until next time.